ladies, gents, and everyones. It is Thursday, March 11th, and we're here to talk about this week's space and astronomy news. First, an update on NASA's Space Launch System. So the SLS green test was postponed in February due to a faulty liquid oxygen valve. That valve is now fixed, and the test is planned to go ahead March 18th, so a week from today. Also, the boosters have now been stacked. So each of the 10 segments for the 2 boosters have been fully stacked on top of the mobile launcher, and they are ready now for the core stage, which will be headed there after it completes that green run test. In Starship news, I think we all remember the SN10 test from last week, which memorably landed and then exploded. Well, Elon Musk announced on Twitter a little bit more information about why it exploded. It turns out that the rocket was coming in still a little bit too fast due to being low on thrust. And so this higher than anticipated impact speed crushed those landing legs that it was supposed to land on, as well as part of the skirt. And so that led to the issues with the SN10, but he said that multiple fixes are in the works for SN11. And speaking of SN11, it has now been moved out to the launch pad in Texas. We still don't know exactly when it's planning to launch, but this is a good sign, so hopefully it'll be relatively soon. Let's head on back to everyone's favorite red planet for some updates on Mars. So Perseverance took its first trip across the surface, traveling about 6.5 meters last Thursday. Now this was a mobility test and is part of a series of tests that the rover is doing to prepare itself for the scientific mission and make sure that all of its instruments and parts are operating correctly. NASA has also just released the first results from the SuperCam instrument, which includes a close-up of these rocks, which is pretty cool, but even more cool in my opinion is the sound that they released, which you can hear the laser from the SuperCam going off. Pew, pew, pew! Actually, it doesn't sound like a pew at all, but it's still really cool. And also, China has released the first images from their Tianwen-1 orbiter around Mars, 1 color image and 2 black and white images, and this color image is beautiful. I think it's amazing. They are still planning to land a rover from the Tianwen-1 mission later this year, and so really exciting to see results coming out from this mission. And speaking of China, they just announced that they signed a memorandum of understanding with Russia about the construction of a future international lunar research station. So this is a planned moon base that will either be on the surface or in orbit around the moon and will be able to conduct long-term autonomous operations and scientific missions. There is no planned target date for the ILRS as of now. Also to note, NASA is planning to do a lunar research station as well as part of its Artemis program, and there are 8 nations that have signed on to the Artemis Accords. However, Russia has indicated that they have no intention to be part of the Artemis program, and the US and China are actually not allowed to cooperate on any space programs without prior congressional approval from Congress due to a law that was passed in 2011, and so it's unlikely that we'll be working with China on the Artemis program either, and so this is kind of going to be a similar but separate mission with some non-Artemis nations. So in a very interesting science story, the Juno Spacecraft team has just released some research about the zodiacal dust in the solar system. Now the zodiacal dust is just dust that we see. It creates zodiacal light. That's this kind of diffuse light in the sky. And in fact, we see this in exoplanet systems as well. And Juno is a probe that is currently in orbit around Jupiter, and in fact has really nothing to do with the zodiacal dust. So this was a very unintended science outcome. But actually what happened is that the Juno team was initially very puzzled by these strange streaks that they were seeing in some of their instruments on the transit to Jupiter. But they looked into it and they were able to discover that actually it was tiny pieces of the solar panels that were being impacted by dust, by the zodiacal dust, and breaking off, because although the dust is very small, it's traveling very quickly, and so it strikes the spacecraft with a pretty large force and was able to break off these small, like millimeter-sized pieces of the solar panels that were then visible in the instruments. And don't worry, it was the dark side of the solar panels, so they still operate just fine. But scientists were able to use the frequency of these dust collisions to actually map out a distribution of zodiacal dust as Juno traveled from Earth to Jupiter, and they were able to basically show that this dust is probably coming from Mars, although it's still not entirely clear how the dust is getting off of the surface of Mars and into the solar system. So a pretty cool way to use some unintended information from a completely separate mission to do some cool new science, and that helped us learn a little bit more and pinpoint things about zodiacal dust in our solar system, which is very useful for our understanding of not only our own solar system, but applying to exoplanet systems as well. So there you have it. That's it for this week. I hope you will come back next week. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good one. Bye.